Nancy.
Welcome to episode 84 of the Front Porch Book Club.
The Front Porch Book Club is a podcast that meets twice a month.
We like to dig deep into the relationship between characters and the worlds they live in.
Grab a book and iced tea and join us on the Front Porch.
Linny, today we interview Dr. Karen Roggenkamp about the Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. What I love about this interview is we get into crime and mysteries, and then we get to talk specifically about the Thursday Murder Club. So I feel like we are covering the whole range of interests in this interview of why it is that we love mysteries so much.
Yeah, I think she's an interesting person because she's so well read in mysteries. And I think this is the first mystery we've done on the Front Porch.
Yes, I think so.
And I think this is my first mystery ever.
Seriously.
And so to hear her talk about Agatha Christie and all these things and say she thinks this is the top of her list for murder mysteries, cozy murder mysteries, as this one is called. I was fascinated by that. Wow, I introduced myself to a good book.
Linny, did you never read Nancy Drew when you were growing up?
No, I never read anything. Are you kidding? Did I read Nancy Drew? You read that whole shelf of Nancy Drew in the library. I didn't read any of them. No way.
That is amazing that this is the first mystery that you've read. So yeah, we picked
in my
a good
whole
one.
life, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, really well known.
And I think based on our conversation last episode, you enjoyed it and interested in reading more.
I could do that. Yes.
All right. I agree. Karen was wonderful to talk to. She's a professor of literature and languages and interim dean honors college at Texas A&M University Commerce. She's written and taught about crime fiction and American literary culture. Karen's written 2 books published by Kent State University Press: Sympathy, Madness, and Crime: How 4 19th Century Journalists Made the Newspaper Women's Business. That was in 2016. And Narrating the News, New Journalism and Literary Genre in the Late 19th Century American Newspapers and Fiction in 2005.
I'm glad you joined us on our podcast. So let's go to it, Nancy.
All right.
Welcome, Karen, to the Front Porch.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. I really appreciate your inviting me to have a talk.
I reached out to you because of your research and teaching on crime in American literature. But when I did, you mentioned you're originally from Nebraska, of all places.
I am.
So tell us, how did a small town Nebraska girl end up getting a PhD in English, specializing in American literature and culture, and moving to Texas?
Yes. I think as someone who worked at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, you might find this amusing.
Okay.
So I was indeed a small town girl who went on a 4-H trip to New York and Washington, and then I decided, no, I'm leaving this state. There's too much to see. So just by an off chance, my high school English teacher was grumbling about how everyone stayed in the state to go to college, and people should look at bigger and better schools in his perception, like the University of Michigan. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll go there. How completely naive first-generation college student. And so I did look at it, and people would ask me, well, why do you want to go to Michigan? And I would explain, I wanted to go to a big school, something different, and that I also wanted to go to a school that was not all about football.
Oh no, Michigan?
Yes. People found that supremely funny. But then I would say, no. You do not understand what it's like to live in Nebraska. And I still hold to that. I absolutely hold to that.
That is true. But you ended up going to University of Minnesota, didn't you?
For my graduate studies, I did.
Okay.
Yes.
So Michigan for your undergraduate.
Yeah. I was determined to leave the Midwest finally and go, I was looking at like North Carolina, places like, but you go with where the money is. And it ended up being yet another Central Plain kind of thing. It was the best place for me. I loved the University of Minnesota. And then somehow I ended up in Texas. Again, you go where the money is. And so I have embraced the fact that I am just forever going to be pretty much a Central Plains, Midwest kind of person, and I'm good with that.
So why did you major in English? What is it about American literature and culture?
So that is another kind of funny story. I think my first true love, and maybe still to this day, my true love, is history. And when I was in high school, I was just sure as anything that I was going to be a prosecuting attorney. That's what I was going to do. I was going to be a prosecutor. And so I thought, well, my undergrad degree can be all sorts of things, but I got a scholarship from the Willa Cather Foundation.
What?
For English majors. And so I thought, okay, well, since I had no way to pay for my schooling at Michigan, that kind of set the path. There's just something about American culture and history that fascinates me. And even though my undergraduate education was very much focused on British literature, the English classes I took that were American lit were what really sparked my interest. I did a little 4-year hiatus as a middle school teacher at an independent school in Grosse Pointe. Decided I didn't want to be part of the Grosse Pointe staff and that 13, 14-year-olds, not ideal for my career choice. And so when I went to graduate school, I knew I wanted it to be something with American literature. And I knew I wanted to do something that was looking at literature within the context of history. I am a literary historian. To me, the line between historical past and fiction is a thin line. And as I say, it's all narrative. So that is what I ended up focusing on. And in particular, not looking closely at literature as art so much, but as genre, exploring the genre interplay between journalism and fiction. So as you can see, there's lots of space there available for thinking about crime. How is crime written in fiction? How is crime reported on? How is it written into story? And so many American fiction writers have also played with that line.
Thinking of that, you're also a writer, and you've written the book, Sympathy, Madness, and Crime, How 4 19th Century Journalists Made the Newspaper Women's Business. Now, I have to tell you, in reading about what you wrote, I know of Nellie Bly, who is in this book, because my master's degree is in counseling. She was a part of my training because she pretended she was mad, in quotes, so that she could go into a psychiatric hospital and then report on what life was like there. And it was a real eye opener to the middle class of what was going on in women's asylums. My memory of it is that it revolutionized the system. Is that right?
I think it would be wrong to say it revolutionized the system, but it did lead to some investigation, certainly some public outrage and attention. Even more than that, though, it made Nellie Bly a household name. I think it's safe to say it did more for Nellie Bly and the New York world than it did for actual prison conditions, sadly. Now, that's not to say her experience and her reporting about her experience did not do something important and draw attention. But writing about asylum conditions, again, we're going to use the parlance of the late 19th century. It was extremely common to have articles about, let's take a visit to Blackwell's Island and take a look at what the patients there are like, what are their activities. There had even been a previous reporter who had gone undercover a couple of decades earlier and reported on it. However, by the time Nellie Bly came along and did it, journalism had become so much more sensationalistic. And the fact that she was a woman, of course, doing this and writing a really vivid story of her experience, the world made that such big publicity that it just sort of took off from there. The question for me as a literary critic and someone who looks closely at how news was packaged in the late 19th century especially, is to kind of question to what degree was this sensational story what was really important to people, as opposed to really being concerned about prison conditions. And in that way, in my book, I am a little bit more critical of Bly than I think a lot of other journalism historians are, because if you read her account alongside other accounts of particularly female journalists talking about asylum conditions, it's not always as sympathetic as you would expect it to be. She makes herself the heroine of the story in a way that I think complicates our picture of fact and fiction, and certainly Nellie Bly.
Very interesting. Yeah. Your interest in this subject matter and researching newspaper women, where does that come from?
So my first book, which was actually my dissertation, was looking specifically at the 1880s and 1890s, a time when you have a rise of sensationalistic, dramatic storytelling, first championed by Joseph Pulitzer, and then taken up later and really magnified and taken grossly out of proportion by William Randolph Hearst. You've probably heard of yellow journalism. Yellow journalism was kind of the outgrowth of a style of newspaper reporting that Pulitzer had started adopting and promoting in the 1880s. And critics called it new journalism, a journalism that sometimes would sacrifice the facts a little bit in order to tell a good story. And that fascinated me. In fact, you can find journalist handbooks and instruction manuals telling reporters that it's okay if you're a little fuzzy on the facts, as long, you don't want to be grossly so. You want to generally stick to the facts, but you have to make it an enjoyable read. And in my coursework for my PhD program, I started finding things about this, and I thought, okay, people have looked at how writers like Walt Whitman and any number of 19th century and early 20th century writers were journalists and then became authors. What if we kind of turn that idea on the head and look at how the newspapers themselves adopted this mode of writing that almost placed newspaper writing in competition, quote unquote, with literary genre, with things like detective stories and things like Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days, which Nellie Bly famously did. That was my first work with Nellie Bly. Or with medieval romance stories. So again, that first book was looking at the interplay between journalism and fiction and genre fiction. But as I did that, I realized that there were some very interesting women writing for papers at a time when it was still very, very much a man's world. And by the late 19th century, of course, women were starting to claw their way into newspaper staffs and things like that, but they still had to really fight to get a place at the table for doing anything other than society news or children's columns. Nellie Bly is a very famous example of someone who successfully made that jump, but she certainly was not alone. And so I decided I wanted to look a little bit further into how women were able to do that. The answer to that, in my mind, in large part, still comes back to the idea of genre. They could do that by taking on the genre conventions of sympathy and sentimentality, quote unquote, women's world stuff. But then they did that in order to be able to talk about things like crime or big institutional problems like asylum reform.
That's fascinating. We've talked a little bit about genre. You taught an undergraduate class called Studies in American Narrative, Mystery, Murder, and Mayhem. Why do we love mysteries so much? And why are these journalists using the conventions and tropes of mystery to hook their readers in? What is it about a mystery?
It's a loaded question with, I think, lots of answers. I think the thing that pops to mind for me is Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Black Cat. And Poe, of course, was largely credited with writing the first detective story. But in The Black Cat, the unreliable narrator of that story says that he was overtaken by perversion. Poe puts that in capital letters in the story. He explains that people frequently will want to do something precisely because they know it is forbidden. And he calls that the spirit of perversion that overcame him. So, reader, surely you understand this. Surely you too want to put your wife into a wall and along with the cat and like block her in.
Uh-huh.
But as much as we recognize as readers that this guy's not going to make his case, he still kind of has a case, right? He's right that we often do want to do things, maybe not often, but we probably can all think back to something we've done in our life that we knew was wrong to do, but we did it anyway, perhaps because we knew it was wrong to do. We were driven by this spirit of perversion. I think that people are eager to read detective novels and maybe especially true crime books or books that are very vivid in their depiction of horrible things happen because there is something deeply psychological within us that wants to know about these things. Not because we are necessarily going to do them, but because maybe on some psychological level, reading about something acts as a kind of a valve for us to like get those thoughts out. Some unconscious part of our brain like needs to release the interest we have in reading about horrible things. Now, sometimes when I say that to my students when we're talking about true crime or Poe, a couple of them will look at me like, okay, it's crazy woman talking about this. But I think most of them understand that there is this the same reason why we slow down on the highway if there's an accident there. We want to see, even though we know we shouldn't want to see, and it's none of our business, we still want to see. I'm no psychologist, but that is sort of what I think of. Is that scary?
No, I don't think so. I think there's something with that. I'm definitely drawn to understanding what is called the spirit of perversion and why people get wrapped up in that. I've never heard that quote before, but I'm fascinated by it. And I love the crime shows and the mystery and all the serial killer stuff. I get really interested in all of that.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to something. And you said Poe came up with that?
Yeah, that was a line from The Black Cat, one of his stories. In my memory, at least, my first in-depth look at true crime was when my college-age sister gave me a copy of In Cold Blood, which she had read for a journalism class. I'm just teaching In Cold Blood right now in a course on literary journalism. That book just captivated me. It horrified me. Mm-hmm. It worried me. Again, that kind of psychological reader response. There's something there that we as people, a lot of us almost feel the need to read about these things that we know are horrible. I mean, I will go to bed sometimes listening to a true crime podcast.
Yes.
My sister Linda thinks I'm insane for that. It's like, how could you do that? But have you ever seen Saturday Night Live a few years ago had one of their skits called Murder Show. I will send you the link. It shows a woman whose husband is going to go out for the night, and he says to her, "Okay, honey, you're going to be okay." "Yeah, I'll be great." And the moment he leaves, it shifts into this song where she's singing about the virtues of watching a murder show. And these various different women all participating in watching a murder show as they are like texting their family, asking how the baby's going, but there's a murder show on. It's so spot on.
You're so right about murder podcasts, true crime podcasts. They are so popular. I have so many friends who describe themselves as being absolutely addicted to those shows. They just absolutely love them. Now, our book this month is Thursday Murder Club. It's a cozy mystery. We don't have all of the true crime, blood and gore. It is a very friendly for senior citizens story. All of the really horrific things happen off stage, as it were. What about this genre? It doesn't have the looking at the accident on the side of the road sort of satisfaction, maybe you might say. What about the cozy mystery genre? Why has that become so popular?
Oh, I think cozy mystery has been popular at least since, well, even before Agatha Christie, but I think we think of Miss Marple, right?
Yes,
yes. And I love that too. I just love that genre. It's comforting, right? As you say, all the action is off stage. And so this is another thing that speaks to why are people interested in detective novels or mystery novels. It's because we want to solve the mystery, right? We want, along with the characters in the book, to be able to look at the pieces and recognize what is going to be a red herring, and is this going to lead to this place or that? And oh, here's a new twist. So it's a different kind of cerebral activity, I would say. And in the case of the Thursday Murder Club, it became, at least for me as a reader, so easy to envision the setting, envision these people. We get to see them come alive and fall in love with them. There's so many wonderful characters that I know I, as a reader, want to know more about, and I wish them well. You know, they're fictional creations, and that serves a different kind of reading process that is something you can curl up with a cup of tea or wine. They consume a lot of wine in that novel.
Right.
So get your glass of wine and immerse yourself in the world of these characters and let it unfold. I think also mystery novels, they highlight human intelligence, a good mystery novel.
Okay,
so I'm thinking of, if we go back to Poe, Murders in the Rue Morgue is often seen as the first detective novel. That's arguable, but that's kind of the starting point. And are you, reader, going to be as intelligent as Auguste Dupin in figuring out what the clues? They're all there. They're all right in front of you. And similarly, in the Thursday Murder Club, very different kind of storytelling, but the characters in the book are likewise so intelligent, and they are able to put things together in a way that is even better than the police. And sometimes there's a little bit of fun in saying, aha, they figured it out before the police. Mm-hmm. So for me, reading is all about the vicarious experience of other people's lives, right? And if a murder mystery does that well, whether it be cozy or whether it be a little bit more graphic, that's what the fun is.
Yeah, there's definitely fun in this book. Did you have a favorite character or a favorite storyline in the book?
Oh, it's hard. I did love Joyce.
Yeah.
I loved Joyce so much for who we see she is with her diary, right? She's so normal. Mm-hmm. She's so perfectly everyday. She talks about the weather and this and that. And I can hear my own mother in her, my 92-year-old mother. But still, there's something intriguing about her, that she is kind of coldly clinical in a way.
Yes.
Elizabeth as well, though. What is her story? We only get hints of this rather thrilling past. And so that's part of the intrigue too, as I was reading, wanting to know, where's this going? What in the world is going on? What is her history?
Did you think that either one of those ladies could have been the murderer?
For a brief moment, I wondered if Joyce was. And I think the author kind of teases us at a couple of points about that. We've all seen Scooby-Doo, right? Sometimes it's the most normal person who's the one behind the mystery. I wondered at a point if I had been sucked into her own depiction of her normalcy, but there was something hidden there. I was relieved she was not.
I agree. I was so relieved she wasn't the murderer. I just was feeling terrible during the parts of the story. I thought she was like, no, Joyce, no, not you.
Joyce. So at the end of the book, they find out who the murderer is, but they don't call the police. They allow him to continue to work at their senior citizen center. You have a thought on why the author decided to let this guy just kind of continue to play chess with him and live his life out?
There's that scene where Bogdan is confessing everything to Elizabeth's husband. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was scared because I had decided I liked Bogdan by that point. But see, these authors, they toy with us, right?
Yes,
they
do.
Fall in love with this character, and then that's just not fair. But I found it fascinating that the author chose to just let it be. I don't think the author is condoning murder in any way, but in a fictional world, you get to kind of set the terms of what a jury of your peer means. You get to set the terms of what justice means in this kind of fictional world. I certainly hope no one would read that and say, oh, this author is advocating this, and this. In my mind, only really clumsy novels advocate in that kind of direct way. I think it's more of a sense of, in the author's world, he is a good person. And in the world of the community, they recognize him as an intriguing, good, kind-hearted person. And they're okay with that. What are your thoughts on that? People are going to have different opinions.
I thought, oh, now that's interesting. They all kind of live by their own rules. And I think they have a different perspective on some things. Like you kind of alluded to that a little bit. You kind of go, well, let's take the whole person into account. And the author doesn't go into why the characters have chosen. It's just a non-issue for them. They just continue to live their life.
But here's the interesting thing about that they don't turn Bogdan in, but Elizabeth is absolutely telling John that she is going to call the police the next morning, and she is going to turn John and Penny in. And these are people who have been her friends. It seems like their entire time at the retirement community. So for years, it seems like, and she loves Penny so much. So she's willing to somehow turn Penny and John in, but she's not turning in this new acquaintance. That's the one question that I had.
It's a really good point.
But Nancy, don't you think that she knew that John was going to take himself out and kill Penny?
Yes, but why accelerate that? She could have had the same agreement with John saying, look, John, obviously you and Penny are implicated in these murders, but we're all at the end of our lives. Let's just live it out. You both have lived good lives, right? Because they're both very upstanding, respected people. They're loving people, but Elizabeth isn't willing to overlook that, and she's willing to overlook it in Bogdan.
Maybe it's because they just wanted to make sure, or Elizabeth wanted to make sure that question of whose body that is was wrapped up so that the police didn't continued to pursue it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I don't know. It is a curious difference.
I thought this cozy mystery was really interesting because we do get a lot of fanciful, almost certainly rules of the author's own making, kind of this very unique world. But the one place where death feels very real in this book is not the murders and all of that, but it's in the mortality of those 4 senior citizens, and that they have lost spouses, or they have spouses that are ailing. They've lost other community members. I thought that is an element of this book that really separates it from other cozy mysteries, because he really is dealing with very real issues of aging in this book.
Absolutely. I was struck by that as well. And as someone who has an aging mother, she's 92. My father-in-law lives with us. He's 91. And you see that decline, and you know there's still so much there.
Yeah.
But you also have to face the idea of mortality. And these characters are facing that as well. And if we go back to the question of why did they let the killer go, I'm struck by something you said, that these people have lived long lives. And as you age, of course, you start to see things in a new way. You gain new perspective. You gain a new sense of what's a big deal versus not. And I'm not saying that murder is not a big deal. Let's make that very clear here.
In case there are any questions.
But I think the author's playing with that idea, but it's so very, very sad and touching. My heart ached for Joyce when she lost Bernard, and they're all facing the reality that their years will be limited. You know, Elizabeth facing Stephen's decline, and just wanting to hold on to him as long as she can. That added such depth to this novel. It puts it in a different kind of league in my mind, even compared to, say, a Miss Marple novel. Agatha Christie didn't write about characters' interiority. That wasn't her interest. And, you know, in that way, I've sometimes been frustrated by her novels because that's so important to me. And I think that's why this cozy mystery set in the English small village, it just hit in the right spot.
I think so. And they're also each dealing with their own diminished capacities in some way. So we've got the death, we've got the recognition. I'm not the powerful trade union leader I used to be. Elizabeth just cannot remember things. So every night she has an exercise for herself to try to make sure that her memory isn't going like Stephen's is. They're each dealing with trying to still hold on to skills and capabilities.
Yeah. Karen, what would you say is your favorite mystery of all time?
Oh, goodness. That is such a hard question. This is going to be up there for me. This has been a really great one to experience.
Oh, I love that.
What was it about this one that set it apart from the others?
I think the depth of it,
Okay.
the combination of humor is not exactly the right word. And I heard the author give an interview in which he said he was very deliberately not trying to write a humor novel, but there is such light drollness and British wit in this novel. I think those extra dimensions of, as we were talking about, the aspect of aging, Red Ron, who the author also said was probably one of his favorite characters. He's still carrying the flag, but you know, how can you not love that richness of character? And then I think also, as an American, I don't know if you find this true, but I love these kinds of mysteries or shows set in the British countryside.
Yes.
And I don't know why that is, because I'm sure British people love them too. But there's something that setting is also very, very important. to me. And this just checked so many boxes. I remember loving Murder at the Vicarage when I was in high school. And looking back, I still love Murder at the Vicarage, but this one tops it. Now I'm getting a hate mail from all the Agatha Christie fans.
No. I thought also this plot was maybe the most complicated plot of any mystery novel that I've read. There is just a lot of moving around in time and space and lots of bodies. There is a lot going on in this book.
And yet he pulls it off.
He does pull it off.
He does.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does.
Do you guys have a favorite mystery?
You know, when I was in high school, I definitely went through the Agatha Christie phase.
Did you do Trixie Belden before then?
No, I did not. But definitely Nancy Drew and Nurse Cherry.
Oh, I remember that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely read those. These are not exactly mystery novels, but there are two contemporary authors that are writing around World War I and World War II, both in England. One is the Maisie Dobbs mystery series, and the other is the Maggie Hope mystery series.
I've heard of neither, so now I'm going to have to look at them.
And I like them. Female protagonists. I like that era. Certainly both set in England, although they travel around the world, of course, on different missions. So I think right now, Maisie and Maggie are my favorites, and they are fun reads, but they both also have issues going on in their life that you follow from book to book to book that I find very interesting. So I think those, but I'm with you. This Thursday Murder Club, I thought it was just so unique and interesting. I think it's going to be on the top of my list, and I'm really interested in reading the other 3 books as well in this series. So you have an administrative role right now, but you are teaching some classes, is that right?
I am. Well, I'm just stepping down from a couple of years in administration, and so I'm going back to teaching more now. Right now, I'm teaching, as I mentioned, a class on literary journalism, jumping right back in that. So we'll continue to do that for a while, and then trying to start a research agenda back up.
Do you want to share anything about what research you're working on?
I'm working on a volume for the Oxford Critical Jack London series on Jack London's unpublished journalism. And then in addition, I've started a couple of digital humanities projects. One is very much fledgling right now about a female journalist who's extremely famous in the late 19th and then early 20th century, named Elizabeth Jordan. But the one I think I'm going to jump into a little bit more is to do a project about an American children's author named Lois Lenski. Have either of you ever read Prairie Girl or Judy's Journey?
No.
Multiple time winner of various important awards, just wrote dozens and dozens of novels and picture books, and she's virtually unknown now. But I think my life course was changed in some important way in 3rd grade when we read Judy's Journey, which is a novel from, 1942 or something. So I find her a fascinating figure, and I want to develop a digital public-facing project about her work.
And what will be involved in that? An archive?
In part, it hopefully will have some archival materials. Her work is still under copyright.
Oh, sure.
So right now it's going to be more of a information about based thing. Right now I've started looking at her regional novels. And this is the way I came to know who Lois Lenski was. She wrote in the, I think the earliest was sometime in the 30s, up into the 60s, novels about children who lived in different areas of the country. And it was very much fitting of the time in the 30s and 40s, sort of let's get to know America. And so Judy's Journey, for instance, is set during the Great Depression. It follows the story of a girl and her family who have been displaced by the Great Depression. They do farm work, so it's middle elementary age telling her story. Another one I loved was called Prairie Girl, which tells the story of a girl and her brother who go to a country schoolhouse in North Dakota in the 40s and their experience.
Oh, wow.
She's got all these children from different regions of the country. She attempted some diversity, which, is always going to be within the context of the time. But she was a fascinating author, and I think so much more work needs to be done with her because of the imprint that she left on children's literature and publishing.
Oh, fascinating. So, what is it in literature that's exciting college students right now?
It used to be dystopian fiction, but I think students are done with dystopian fiction because we live in dystopia.
That's true.
I have taught a class before, and I'm teaching it again this fall, a class on American history and literature, in which I pair historical documents with then literary renditions of the same thing. So, for instance, we're doing the Salem witch trials. We'll look at the court documents, and then I'm not sure which literary take we'll look at, probably a couple of different things. We'll do something with Lizzie Borden, because I always have to talk about Lizzie Borden in some way. Students loved that class last time I taught it, and I love it. Any course like that, I think, gets them to wake up their brains and to start thinking with more depth about how do we understand the past? What role do historians play in shaping our perception of the past? What role do fiction writers play? Those are the kinds of critical thinking skills and literacies that we want them to develop. And I think that they enjoy that process as well.
I love that you're teaching that class because to me, it seems like it's a combination of your love of literature and journalism, but also you thought you were going to be a public defender. So you're looking at these court documents too. It's like
I never made that connection, but you are so right. And the last time I taught that course, I put the syllabus together, and I think it was not until maybe a third of the way through the class I realized, oh, these are all about crimes. So I guess it's still there. It's still there somehow.
Well, that's great. Linny and I read I Am a Man by Joe Starita, and that's the famous trial with Chief Standing Bear, the first time that the Supreme Court recognizes that Native Americans are actually people. So I will suggest that for your course potentially.
Wonderful. That is wonderful, because I'm hoping to have some more authors to consider for that class. I want to do a little bit of revamp for it.
And that also ties into your Nebraska roots.
It sure does.
That took place in Omaha.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's amazing what you don't learn when you grow up in Nebraska. I recall asking my mother once, where did the Pawnee go? And she just kind of said, oh, they went away. that was it. And it wasn't until I was in graduate school that I found out about the actual court cases that led to removal. And this is why history is just so, so vital. Whether that history comes in the form of a novel or preferably a novel tied into its historical context, that's how students learn history, in my experience.
Absolutely. There's nothing like a novel to really bring a story to life, and also narrative nonfiction too. Really good narrative nonfiction does the same thing.
I've done a fair bit of work with John Steinbeck, and he, after the Second World War, wrote, I think it was like a documentary, the script for a documentary about starvation in Asia and particularly China. He focused on one Chinese child, and when asked why he wasn't showing the scope of the starvation, he said something to the effect of, nobody cares about millions of starving Chinese children. Yeah. People will care about one starving child. That's what narrative can do for us. It can tell a story that our minds cannot otherwise comprehend.
Right.
Absolutely. I think they say the best stories are those that are very detailed, and it's in that detail that you can see the world.
Absolutely. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Well, this has just been absolutely delightful. Thank you so much for stopping by the Front Porch and chatting with us about mystery and true crime and the Thursday Murder Club.
It has been a delight for me. I can't thank you enough for inviting me.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Nancy, wasn't that good?
That was so fun.
You know what? If I had professors like her in college, I probably would have enjoyed it more. I don't know. I think I took one literature course and that one was a stretch. Like, oh, how did I end up in this course? Oh, I hate reading. Why did I take this?
Do you even remember what the topic area was?
I remember we had to read like Tom Sawyer, Huck
Okay.
Finn. And so I think it was American literature. And that was okay to read because it wasn't too complicated. But I think I took it because it fit in the band schedule and everything else I was doing. And I had to take something, but I don't remember enjoying it.
I sort of want to take her course that she's teaching in the fall, tying in this court and primary documentation then with novels that are written about that time. I think that would be so fascinating.
She's going to do a great job. You can tell she's like the type of professor that brings all this stuff alive.
Yeah.
She's not stuffy at all. Yeah, I think she'd be good. Okay. Now, one thing that I thought stood out for me was the spirit of perversion, because I have that. I didn't really know what it was called.
Okay.
But I do like understanding it. I don't know that I'm not going to go out on a limb and say I have it. But I do slow down sometimes when I get up to the traffic problems. But I say a prayer for people when I do that.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that dark stuff. And like, how do people get to this perversion of themselves? What constitutes that? And then what can free them up from it?
Mm-hmm.
So I love that kind of stuff. So that's a term that I want to keep with me, because that spirit of perversion that Poe came up with, I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, you do really like the dark stuff. I remember when you
The dark side.
you said you were watching the prequel to Psycho.
Oh, I love that. Oh, yes. Oh,
I don't think I could force myself to watch that.
oh, that was fascinating. I love that stuff. I love it. I love it. I love it. My favorite Star Wars is when Anakin becomes Darth Vader. I mean, I love all that stuff. You know, I'm right there.
Wow.
Spirit of perversion.
Hey, do you remember when we went down to Baltimore and visited Edgar Allan Poe's house?
No.
My goodness. Yeah.
I don't.
Well, no.
We did? In Baltimore?
Yeah, in Baltimore. Now, admittedly, it was probably 35 years ago, but
35 years ago, Nancy.
we were out of college, though. It was one of those times we ran down to Baltimore, and who knows what we were doing. We were running around. Probably went to...
Oh, you probably drugged me to that place. You're probably, let's go. Who's Edgar Allan Poe was probably what I was. Whose house? Where is he from? Why do we need to go there?
You loved it. You loved it.
I did?
Yes.
Is it just like a city row house?
Yeah.
Or what is it?
Yeah, it's a row house. And then in the back, there was a garden. And
Oh, well, I may have liked the garden, but I may have loved it because you were excited about it and I just wanted to be polite. I don't think I loved it.
it
I don't remember it.
Maybe though, you did like it because there was a whiff of the spirit of perversion still hanging around his house.
Ooh, if there was that, I might have gotten into it. Yeah. Interesting. I didn't know he lived in Baltimore.
Oh, he lived in a number of different places, but one of the places you can visit where he lived was Baltimore.
Interesting.
Mhm.
I had no idea.
Yep.
Well, next month, Nancy, totally different genre of book.
Yes.
We are going to be looking at Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty by Patrick Radden Keefe. So I haven't started this book yet. I believe you have.
Talk about the spirit of perversion. This is a bone-chilling narrative journalistic piece about the real life Sackler family and how they invented and pushed OxyContin and created the opioid epidemic that has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans.
Okay, well, you got me thinking now.
It's something that is just so upsetting, and
Oh, no.
just how the greed and desire for profits of one family and the way they willfully manipulated the system led to so much death and suffering across our country and elsewhere in the world, of course.
Oh, my.
I'll tell you, it is such a great book. It's a book I feel like everyone in the United States should read.
Oh, dear. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I will read it.
Well, good.
That'll be my next download. I don't think that sounds like a beach read, though. And I am going to the beach. So, but I'll do it. I'm up for it.
I'll tell you, I think it's a beach read to the extent that you will get into it and that story just sucks you in.
Oh, okay.
I don't think you'll need to keep a separate piece of paper and pen with all the characters like you had to do with the Thursday Murder Club. The only thing you're tracking in the Empire of Pain is how can this family fall any lower? Oh, and look, there they've done it.
Really? Oh, my goodness.
How can they be any more despicable? Oh, look, they've done it.
Okay. Well, I actually am looking forward to reading this book now, so I'm glad we talked about it a bit.
And I think with your background, my guess is you see drug and alcohol patients.
I do.
And the effects of that. So I
Sure.
think this will be interesting for you from the perspective of why did we start having that prescription drug crisis? And what is that with the new heroin epidemic that's happening? Oh, this book explains it all.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in.
The author says this family is the taproot of the prescription drug crisis, and what flowed out of that was the heroin crisis.
All right. Well, I look forward to it, Nance.
There's not going to be a whole lot of laughter, I don't think, though. This is
Okay.
nothing cozy, nothing charming. It's, but it's very important. Very important.
Okay. Okay. We'll do it.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Our website is frontporchbookclub.com.
Our episodes come out twice a month on the first and third Wednesdays.
See you next time, Linny.
See you, Nance. Okay.